Hey, you guys, let's talk about pattern unveiling words, prophetic words, as opposed to word of knowledge. Prophetic type says something and you like confirmation that was already brewing in me. That, I did dream of opening a restaurant, so you are right. Yeah, I do feel called to this particular type of ministry. Yep, thank you for the confirmation. It's an emboldening word. Prophetic word is more like, Mary, you're going to have a baby. and, conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit. That would, no, I wasn't just thinking that. That wasn't something I was thinking I was going to do. Gideon, you are a mighty man of valor. That's a prophetic word because at the time, Gideon was hiding in one of the farmhouses from the Philistines. So they're speaking to a future version of yourself that hasn't quite been born yet, hasn't quite come about yet, but it's prophetic because it's invoking a potential that you have in your future, the future you. So prophetic unveiling or unveiling the fabric of reality concerning global changes that are a pattern. So I'm calling this pattern unveiling words. So Daniel, Jeremiah 51, Matthew 24, Book of Revelation, these are pattern unveiling. These are things that go on in mankind every 2,000 to 3,000 years, or even every 100 years, depending on the situation. So they are a prophetic type, a prophetically gifted individual has to have like some point of reference, like a city, something going on in a city, something going on in a nation, something going on in a local church, in order to have some type of a language for what they're seeing. So they think it's about this local church or about this nation or about this city, about this situation, this crisis. And in a way it is, but a true pattern unveiling word is timeless because it applies to what's going on in the deep recesses of humankind and manifests as a major change of the age, from law to grace. From 33 AD, the crucifixion, till 200 AD, all animal sacrificial systems in general ended, and Vedic literature, Buddhist literature, the words of Jesus about identifying as spirit, I am love, joy, peace, goodness, righteousness, replaced, spirit identification replaced sinner identification. Sinner identification is what we're horrible and we need blood sacrifice. And so the world changed. And the pattern of how the world changed from animal sacrifice in both pagan, polytheistic, shamanic, and monotheistic religions such as Judaism, how it changed is a pattern. It changed because there was something in mankind that was ready to give birth to its son. Mankind had a son. So that's why Jesus termed what was on the way the Son of Man. What was on the way that would lead mankind, lead the nations, judge the nations, is the Son of Man. Matthew 25:31, the Son of Man. And that the Son of Man has nowhere to lay its head. It won't be celebrated at first. The Son of Man, will he find faith? What the Son of God will. The Son of God is a manifestation of a God some people already knew. The Son of God is a manifestation of a revealing and unveiling of the God of some lineage, of some sect, of some religion. So Saul of Tarsus manifested Yahweh of Torah. Jesus manifested a new Abba that he created from his heart shape. John 5:37, heart shape, or form, as it says in the NIV. He told the Pharisees, you've not seen his form. And so grace had a different heart shape than law. Okay, so the change of the age is a pattern that happens every so often in mankind on a global level. And so a prophet like Jeremiah 51 is an example of that. Babylon has fallen. To summarize, the true Christ nature has taken its victory. Babylon has fallen. It's a bloody war. It's a midnight of the soul. It's really difficult. There's much tribulation involved, but it will end in victory. It's going to be all right. That's Jeremiah 51. Now, in his mind, he was applying it to the way that the current king of Babylon would be removed, because he was in exile. The Jews were in exile. They were slaves in Babylon, and he was prophesying about how this is going to take place. How are we going to get free from Babylon and go back to our homeland? He said it's going to be a bloody, terrible war, lots of bloodshed, lots of violence. And guess what happened? None of that happened. That was his mind's point of reference, was that city and that king and a new king coming. Cyrus took over. Guess what? Cyrus took over. The previous king was ousted. Cyrus took over in a period of a few days. There was no war. The people welcomed him in peace. And he sent the Jews back to their homeland. There were probably, according to the Cyrus cylinder, which is housed in a British museum now, an archaeological dig, the Cyrus cylinder revealed that there were probably 20 to 30 different slave groups. And Cyrus takes over, removes the old king, makes a fresh covenant with Marduk, god of Babylon. Marduk, not Yahweh. He'd never heard of Yahweh. The Jews weren't even mentioned, but a lot of slave groups were sent back to their homelands with reparations, because that was the right thing to do, from a virtuous heart of Cyrus. Cyrus creates the first multi-ethnic, multi-religious, multi-faith. Goddess shrines are honored. Marduk is honored. Every religion that represented the people was honored. It was a beautiful thing. So the way that the current state of Babylon that Jeremiah had known during the captivity, that did fall. But what overturned it was Cyrus being welcomed as the new king, welcomed in peace. There was no war, there was no bloodshed. He got it wrong. Jeremiah got it completely wrong, if you need it to be literal. But I believe Jeremiah received a pattern unveiling, unlike when he prophesied at a younger age. He prophesied about the coming Babylonian captivity, and it was literal, and it was fulfilled exactly in the literal as he had described. But when a prophet matures, sometimes they don't realize they're slipping into a higher heavenly dimension where they're seeing a global shift, a global change, where the Babylon is hierarchy, and the Christ nature taking over as the new king is harmonization. I think Jeremiah was really seeing hierarchy ending for the harmonization that would take place in the early church 400 years later, when Peter established a commune where everybody sold everything, had all things in common, and food was distributed, necessities were distributed as necessary. Harmonization was the Christ nature, that the new king that ousted the Babylon of hierarchy in the Jewish people. What's coming in America is that same thing. Fascism is taking over, but harmonization will result. In the end, God promises me. It might not be called the United States of America anymore by the time that happens, but that pattern is in mankind. And it always happens. The secularization of Germany is because Christianity was used and weaponized to create the Holocaust. As Hitler said, our movement, referring to the Nazi movement, our movement is a Christian movement. And we will destroy everything that's not Christian. So, their Babylon fell. And what was their Babylon? Christianity. All the German Christians loved throwing those damn immigrants into the gas chambers, those filthy Jews, as they would say, because it was believed that they sacrificed babies to Satan. I mean, that's the thing to say about any people you don't like to justify their genocide. All right, so Babylon fell. Jeremiah 51 was fulfilled in Germany. Babylon fell. The Christ nature took over in Germany by destroying Christianity, secularizing the place so that people can live by the Christ nature of their own inner compass of morality. And they do, for the most part, as much as is possible in this time in human history. So so in Babylon, they changed the form of Marduk from one who used the previous king to enslave. Marduk was now perceived by Cyrus and his people as one who sets the slave free with reparations and creates harmony. And so Christian pastors like John Pavlovitz and people like him broke away from the hierarchical Christianity that was based on British Israelism, Christian identity movement, white supremacy identity movement. The Ku Klux Klan, its head was Roy Davis, and he anointed William Branham as the greatest prophet in the last century. So the Ku Klux Klan version of Christianity that is MAGA now will be destroyed. That Babylon will fall, and harmonization will be the result, because it's a pattern. So Jeremiah 51 describes its destruction, and it is a bloody, he was right, it is a bloody war. It is a lot of spiritual violence taking place. It is a lot of division. But though he was applying it to a city that it didn't happen that way, he was right to apply it to a pattern within mankind being unveiled. The word apocalypse means to unveil, to reveal what had been hidden. And so the book of Revelation is properly called the book of the revelation of Jesus Christ. So the Christ nature is constantly being revealed as love thy neighbor. It is not a saying, but it is a nature. It is a kind of heart. It is a heart shape that is different from white supremacy. Homophobia, misogyny. It's a heart shape. Love thy neighbor is the ethnicity celebrating each other. So the Babylon that will fall is hierarchy, and the Christ nature that will become king is harmonization. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And you have to have the courage to look within your heart and find truth, because whether Germany then or MAGA now are being inundated daily with lies and more lies and more lies about who to hate. Hitler convinced Germany of why they should hate the Jews. Trump has convinced white Americans why they should hate people who have brown skin. And most of those are Christians. Most of those have never committed a crime. But MAGA doesn't believe they have never committed a crime. MAGA believes they're all rapists and murderers. They want to believe that they can justify they can justify the violence against them. But the true violence will be from the Creator to the mentality. The Creator is here to crush and kill and destroy that mentality of MAGA to bring harmonization, just like he crushed and killed that mentality in Babylon to bring Cyrus and therefore peace. So same thing with the book of Revelation. He applied it, John on Patmos applied it to the destruction of the Roman Empire, but no, that's not what happened. He was wrong. The Roman Empire and the Sanhedrin, the Jewish Sanhedrin was destroyed. But Nero and the Roman Empire, the way that things ended and a new beginning happened was because the Roman Empire became Christian. That's how their Babylon of persecuting the Christians ended, and a new Christ nature took over as they became a Christian empire. And it wasn't with bloody violence that they were overcome, like John on Patmos was saying. They just, 400 years later, the Roman Empire just kind of fizzled out. But so was John on Patmos wrong, like Jeremiah was wrong about a bloody, violent overtake of Babylon? No. They were both right, but they were both right in the sense that they were unveiling something going on a global level in mankind every 2,000 to 3,000 years. A greater degree of hierarchy and caste system and hate for those different from yourself that world ends for a greater measure always a greater measure of love, inclusivity, equality for all. Gender equality, orientation equality, ethnicity equality, and national equality. When we start celebrating instead of coexisting, start celebrating that which is other, being interested in learning from that which is different from yourself, this is when the Babylon that John was describing falls. I'm not talking about Crowley's Babylon spelled with an A. That's just the feminine nature in all mankind that we need to affirm. So I'm not talking about that right now. I'm talking about John on Patmos. His Babylon was that which is against the Christ nature taking over. But there's a lot of different ways to perceive that, because we do, as we are more inclusive, our former religious eye, our former religious hierarchical perception perceives what we're now becoming in our more evolved state as the harlot, because you're not married to one sect anymore. You're not married to one theology anymore. You are now giving and receiving from all. So you're the holy version of the harlot. So yeah, you become the harlot, and then you realize in so doing, you're the bride that descends, no longer in ascension, but in descension, to heal the nations. By the people, the bride is the people groups that are activists right now. Their word will spread, just like the bride descending was the 12 apostles and the people who believed in their word, and their word spreading. Gentile inclusion, the Christ nature, love one another. That world commenced. And 2,000 years later, instead of Gentile inclusion, it's human inclusion. Affirmation of your erotic, affirmation of your orientation, affirmation of who you are as a human being. Not just as it was in the Jesus movement 2,000 years ago, affirmation of who you are as a spirit being. The sacred spirit identity 2,000 years ago. In today's world, the Mount of Transfiguration, instead of changing you from sinner identification to spirit identification, it now takes you from spirit identification, because you're too detached from your humanity and other people's humanity, to sacred human identification with the Holy Spirit interwoven in your humanity. And that's what's going to bring this thing to the Third Testament. So they left the First Testament for the Second Testament. In today's world, we're going to leave the Second Testament for the Third Testament. And so the Mount of Transfiguration looks different today than it did then. Back then, the Mount of Transfiguration was heaven and earth fusion, so you could understand yourself as spirit, as the beloved. In today's Mount of Transfiguration, you're going to understand yourself as human, as the beloved human, the sacred human identity. So if you're still in, I am a manifest son of God, you're identifying as that, and you want that to be a celebrated thing. But as soon as someone says I'm gay, or someone's making themselves visibly, making it visible that they are Palestinian, or Ukrainian, or gay, or trans, or black, or brown, labels, quit the labels, because you don't want them to be celebrated. There's something in you that's still in hierarchy. You're not into the Third Testament, you're still in the Second. So it's like, what if I said, oh, what a beautiful orange sunset? Or what if I said, what a beautiful purple sunset? And you said, labels. Why does it got to be purple? Why does it got to be purple? Why a purple sunset? Why, all sunsets are the same. Don't label it purple. Well, it's different than an orange sunset. It's different than a golden sunset. And I appreciate it in a different way. I mean, this husky. This is a schnauzer. Oh, labels. All dogs are the same. No. You appreciate each kind of dog, But as soon as someone says they're labels, So if you are okay with labeling a sunset to celebrate what color it is, then you do see color. And you have to see color in order to celebrate it. But as soon as it's about ethnicity, don't say your color. Why does it have to be black? Why does it have to be a black musician? Why can't it just be a human? Because you don't want visibility and celebration towards black and brown culture. That's why. That's why you're fine with all kinds of labeling in your hobby, but as soon as labels that allow visibility, which allow then celebration which allow then learning, cross-pollinating, then all of a sudden you're against it. Then also, well, we just won't identify. We won't identify as white then. So you're the woman standing before Solomon saying, "Cut the baby in half. I'd rather you to kill the baby than to go to its actual mother." Where its actual mother was like, "Well, let it go to the false mother. I'd rather it live than die." You know, that's how Solomon knew who was the true mother. So you'd rather kill your own identity than to let the identities and the visibility of people different than you to come up into society and be equally celebrated as your identity. We'll just kill all identities then. But this Mother Earth is having a baby. Mother Earth is once again in labor, having a baby, and this baby is love and equality for all. Celebration of one another, learning from one another. The hierarchy, the demonic hierarchy will once again be destroyed. And the use of religion to promote hierarchy and the extermination of visibility of people in the spectrum of humanity, in the spectrum of creation, in the spectrum of orientation, in the spectrum of sexuality, in the spectrum of hobbies, in the spectrum of work ethics, climbing the corporate ladder or creating your own business, all that's got to be visible and celebrated and learned from. And if there's something in you that hates it, then I'm telling you, it's because search your heart, you're still in the Second Testament. So, when the word of equality through Black Lives Matter movement, through the gender equality activists, etc., 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 when that word, as Paul said, our sound went into all the earth. When that word comes and you resist it, instead of allowing yourself to be wooed into harmonization, if you resist it, then that seed came to you, was planted in your ground, but you didn't allow that grain to become wheat. You didn't allow that baby to be fed, nourished, and grow up to adulthood. The new you, the new nature. You didn't come down from ascension into descension like the Revelation 21 bride. So Jesus said, in the day of the Lord, when it changes, Matthew 24 is also a pattern unveiling. He was applying it to Jerusalem in his mental point of reference, but it didn't really apply to Jerusalem because in 70 AD, when the armies of Rome surrounded Jerusalem, just like he said that would happen in that generation, he said, "You don't know the day or the hour, but I am telling you the generation." It's Peter's generation. He was looking at Peter, James, and John and the rest. He said, in this generation, your generation, all these things will be fulfilled. The armies will surround Jerusalem. That happened in the literal. But then everything else after that he spoke was metaphor. The sun being blotted out, the stars falling to the earth. The thing that was guiding you, the law and the Torah that was guiding you won't guide you, and it won't be your light anymore. That will be blotted out for a new day, a new sunlight. He quotes the psalm that said, "The knowledge of the glory of the Lord is the bridegroom's sunlight shining from the east to the west." He said, that's the new day. The day of the Lord will be it won't be in the secret chamber of the Holy of Holies, although that's a sacred experience. It won't be in the wilderness wanderings. If they say he's in the desert, he's not there. If they say he's in the secret chamber, he's not there. The Son of Man, the return of the Christ, will be as a new understanding of God, a new reality in mankind that shines from the east all the way to the west. A new day begins in the east and the sun sets in the west. That's the coming of the Lord. The new you that takes your whole life to experience. That's why he said, some of you standing here will not taste of death till you've seen the Son of Man. Not the Son of God, you're the Son of God now. You're a manifestation of the God from your lineage, the God that Jesus taught the apostles, the God that the Abba, the God that Jesus gave the 12 apostles. They were a manifestation of that God right away on the day of Pentecost. But it would take their whole lives to become the Son of Man. He said, by the time you're done preaching in all the cities of Israel, you will have seen the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So Son of God, you're a manifestation of spirit. Son of Man, you're a manifestation of humanity relating to humanity. And he said, so that new message that starts in the east, it arises in the east, sets in the west. But it can't set in the west. It can't complete itself if you resist that new revelation. From law to grace then, 2,000 years later, the same pattern is being unveiled. From grace, which is spirit identity, spirit empowerment, to sacred human identity. From grace to the universal Christ. seen in all people. But whether then or now, the pattern is the same. And here's the pattern Jesus gave us. Don't resist the word. Don't resist the new revelation, because if you resist it, then when the time comes for you to when the time really comes for you to go to that Mount of Transfiguration, whether in 2,000 years ago from law to grace, or today from grace to oneness with all, either way, it'll be easy if you've been cultivating. If you've been growing up that revelation the whole time, it'll be easy to go right into the full reality in the Mount of Transfiguration, where you say goodbye to your Elijah and Moses. Mount of Transfiguration, he invokes Elijah and Moses, says goodbye. The voice says, not three voices, not three voices, not three voices, not all three of you. The old has to go away. This is my son, hear him. Grace only, not grace and the law and the prophets. The law and the prophets brought you as a schoolmaster to this place, but once you get to this place of sonship, that's it. So whatever your law and prophet is, your prophecies over your life you received in a more juvenile state, you understood it in the condition you were in at the time, the mentality you had at the time. It's time to go away from that mentality, and you're going to understand your own prophetic promises in a new light now. The law you were living by, the law of legalism, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Say goodbye to that. You're going to understand being the beloved now. Okay? Instead of thoughts, in today's world, instead of thoughts become things, now you're going to create the new you, and the new you will attract proper and right things into your world. So for me, in my Mount of Transfiguration, I invoked Joe Dispenza and said goodbye. Thoughts becoming things was powerful, it was wonderful. I created many positive outcomes as a conscious creator, and that principle is true, will always be true. But there's something greater than these. You shall see. According John chapter 1, right at the end, Jesus says to Nathanael, "You will see even greater things than these." And that's what I'm telling you. There's something greater than the law of attraction. So when you give birth to that new baby, which is human affirmation, where you, instead of living above the angst and the timidity and the low self-esteem and arrogance, instead of living above it, where you have to do that every day, because you're scared shitless, you might collapse a negative reality if you think of negative thought or say something. There's something greater than that, a life lived in fear, running away from every negative emotion. So I said goodbye to Dispenza, and I integrated, per the instructions of Spirit, I integrated with everything going on in the deepest recesses of my being, instead of living above it. And that created, instead of creating a positive outcome in this situation, I'm tired of creating positive outcomes by forcing my feminine energy to be a man, forcing my feminine energy to align with the masculine seed, the thought sperm. The thought sperm, I know the end from the beginning. I declare a thing and it shall be done. That's the Spirit's job. But we never, in Dispenza, we never allowed the feminine energy to do her job, which is to tell you the truth about where you're at in the process. Self-awareness is the feminine energy. We never allowed it. We just forced our self-awareness to become spirit awareness all the time and say, I am spirit, and that's all I am. And that creates dysfunction, and there's no human development. And when there's no human development, your human attributes start to atrophy. They start to devolve, and then you really will be a complainer. Then you really will have lust. Then you really will be all the things that Dispenza said that the lower nature is. Okay, but if you focus and you integrate, you start to develop the psychology, you start to develop the intuition, you start to develop the human energies, and next thing you know, you go right through that heaven-earth fusion. You're the mountain in between heaven and earth. You're not heaven, you're not seated in the heavenly places, and you're not earth, you're not irresponsible hedonism, you're the mountain in between, Mount of Transfiguration for today. Back then, law to grace. Today, grace to oneness. Grace to sacred human identity, with the Holy Spirit interwoven in your humanity. But if you resist it, then that grain didn't become wheat. There's no you're walking in the Spirit. You're doing great according to Paul and Jesus and Peter, but that's their dispensation. What's ours? When I integrate with my angst, no more angst. When I integrated with my timidity, no more timidity, became confidence. So I don't have to live above anything. Integration, fusion, that's the mountain in between heaven and earth. And that's the Mount of Transfiguration. And Jesus said, you go from your Jerusalem, whatever you know to be your God habitation, your ethereal spirit. You flee, you're supposed to, in the day of the Lord, you're supposed to flee from your Jerusalem to the Mount of Transfiguration, or what he just said, the mountains. And it really didn't apply to 70 AD. It didn't really apply just to 70 AD, because that was really, they had already persecuted the Christians. 70 AD, when they destroyed the temple, that was a massacre to the Jewish people who didn't believe in Jesus. So it really wasn't applicable to the crowd he was talking to. Flee to the mountains. Although a few Jewish rabbis did flee to the caves. It was a pattern unveiling of metaphor that happens in mankind every so often. Matthew 24 wasn't just about 70 AD. It was a pattern that happens in all of us as we mature. Oh, I get a phone call coming in. So you flee from what you've known to be just spirit only, spirit identity, and you go into the Mount of Transfiguration. But he said, make sure your flight is not in winter. And why would it be in winter? Because you resisted the change. You resisted nurturing that new revelation that came from the Black Lives Matter movement, from the activists. You resisted it, so it's still in the earth and it never bore its fruit. He said, make sure your flight is not in winter or on the Sabbath. I mean, you're still in the Sabbath rest of the previous God form. You're still acclimating to resting in what Dispenza talks about. You're not even ready for the next stage after that, from the law of the observer and positive outcome. You're not ready for integration yet. Make sure your flight is not when you're nursing. You're still nursing what Dispenza gave. You haven't grown it up yet. You're not ready for the next stage of integration and fusion spirituality, human affirmation. Make sure your flight is not in winter or on the Sabbath or when you're nursing. And he said, if you're still on ascension when, you're supposed to have completed ascension and descension. Sitting in heavenly places and then spirit finding itself in earth, spirit finding itself in the sacred human expression, human identity. Because ascension is your human energies are absorbed into your spirit. Descension is when your glorified spirit is now absorbed into your human expression. You haven't even been through descension. Ascension and descension equals the Mount of Transfiguration. You can't go to the Mount of Transfiguration if you're still on the rooftop. So if you're still on the rooftop when that trumpet blows and you're called into the Mount of Transfiguration in your life, and it's different. It looks different for everybody. It's at a different stage of life for everybody. It's a personal thing. But if you're still on the housetop, don't even come down. Tribulation will take you there. Crisis situations you go through will eventually purify you and you'll go there. So if you're still on the housetop when this is supposed with the ordained time in your life, like Peter resisted the change. So God, on the housetop, God corrected his attitude. He said, quit calling Gentiles unclean. Don't call what I've cleansed common or unclean. But he still resisted it after that. And in Galatians 2, Paul publicly rebukes him for his racism when he withdraws from Gentile company. And he still didn't get it after that. The Greek, he was feeding everybody in the commune except for the Greek women. He called out publicly. This is tribulatory. You're the leader, Peter. You're the rock. And he gets publicly exposed twice. So he went in, but he went in through tribulation. Paul's process with misogyny. He did run well, and then he ordains Priscilla in Romans 16:3, I think. He says in his very first epistle he wrote, Galatians, there's no male or female in Christ. But then towards the end of his life, he writes to Timothy and says, a woman cannot teach because she's the one that sinned, not the man. Let the women keep silence and let them ask their husbands at home. So he did run well, but he got bewitched back to Gamaliel's mentality. The Jewish rabbis say it's better to burn the Torah than to give it to a woman. So he got brought in, but it was through much tribulation. As he said in the book of Acts, Luke writes the book of Acts and quotes Paul as saying, "It is through much tribulation that we enter the kingdom." So the first coming of the Lord is revealed in John 14, and that's the day of Pentecost, the indwelling. He said, "How will we see you, and the world won't?" So it's first, the coming of the Lord is first a personal thing within you. How will we see you the second time, and the world won't? He said, the indwelling. "If a man love me, he will keep my words. My Father will love him, and we will make our abode in him." But then he talks about the second coming of the Lord, the second return of Jesus, which is every eye shall see him in the cloud of your created being. As Peter as Peter was indwelt in Pentecost, it was still just a personal thing with him. It hadn't been revealed to the outer world yet because he was still cursing Ananias and Sapphira with death because they weren't Jewish. If that had been Elizabeth and Zacharias and Elizabeth, John the Baptist's parents, he wouldn't have done that. So it was people, and every eye shall see him. They weren't seeing Jesus, the nature of Jesus in Peter, not yet, because it was only the John 14 coming of the Lord, the day of Pentecost. Ascends as a man, comes back as a spirit to begin the work, to begin the John 16:21 birthing process. Hallelujah! But by the end of Peter's life, he finally went from his Jerusalem to his Mount of Transfiguration, but he went in through much tribulation because he was resisting Gentile inclusion authentically in his heart. He was resisting it, so he wasn't letting that crop bear. It was still winter. Woe to you when this day happens, the return of the Lord happens in the birthing process, and you are still nursing that baby. Peter, it's still winter season. You haven't grown that crop yet. But you'll be brought in through much tribulation. It's just a harder process. Legalism to grace back in the 1980s was very difficult. I had to go through the fire. My Christianity was destroyed before I was able to, I just left and partied for a few years before I was able to get the revelation of grace. Everything had to be completely plucked up from the roots because I was resisting the grace theology. I was still in performance mentality. I was still in legalism. Still in being dogmatic. I couldn't go in. That stuff was too strong. So it's no condemnation. It's just if your racism, your legalism, your homophobia, if it's too strong, then you're going to go in, but you're going to go in through much tribulation. The fire will have to burn all that stubble away. But when it came much later in life from grace theology to the universal Christ, I went in easy, and from universalism to activism, I went in easy because I learned the first time, how hard it is if you resist the revelation. So Matthew 24 is a pattern unveiling word. The whole book of Revelation is a pattern unveiling word. Hearing the trumpet, the vial of oil, the sevenfold vial of oil destroys the old creation. The sevenfold trumpet destroys rivers of communication, sea of subconscious, sunlight of worldview, how you perceive God. In the trumpet, it's your spirit only. It's the coming of the Lord just in your spirit. John 14, the abode. You hear the trumpet, it transfigures 1/3 of the rivers, 1/3 of the sunlight, 1/3 of the sea is changed. But in the pouring out of the vials of the wrath of God, which just means full intention to remove the old. Full intention in your soul, not just in your spirit, but in all of your being. Your spirit is 1/3 of your being, spirit, soul, and body. But the vial of oil is poured out, the vial of wrath of God is poured out. Now you're changed in all the rivers are changed. See, second trumpet, 1/3 of the rivers are changed, or 1/3 of the sea. Second vial of oil, all of the sea is changed. Third trumpet, 1/3 of the rivers. Third vial of oil, all the rivers. 1/3 of the sunlight in the fourth trumpet. The fourth vial of oil, all the sunlight is affected. Until we become the harlot, the holy version of the harlot, giving and receiving from all, and then we recognize, twinkling of the eye, last trumpet, twinkling of the eye, our eyes of perception are flooded with light. We are the bride married to God's wisdom, and we do heal the nations.